Skeletal and rejected, she asked for refuge. Apache warrior made her his queen. The Arizona desert stretched endlessly under the scorching sun of 1873. Its red earth cracked like broken pottery. Sarah Matthews stumbled through the thorny brush, her once blue dress now torn and faded to the color of dust. Her ribs showed through the thin fabric, and her blonde hair hung in matted strings around her gaunt face. She had been walking for 3 days without food, surviving only on muddy water from dried creek beds. Behind her lay the smoking ruins of her life. The cholera had taken her husband first, then her 2 young children within days of each other. The townspeople of Tombstone had whispered that she was cursed, that death followed her like a shadow. When the bank foreclosed on their small farm, she had nowhere left to turn. The respectable families wouldn't take her in, and the saloon owner had made his intentions clear when he offered her work. So she had taken what little remained of her belongings and walked into the desert, preferring to die with dignity than live in shame. The sun beat down mercilessly as she crested a small hill, her bare feet bleeding from the sharp stone. In the distance, she could see smoke rising from what appeared to be a camp. Her heart raced with both hope and terror. Out here, it could be prospectors, soldiers, or worse, but she had no choice. Her legs gave out as she tried to descend the slope, and she tumbled down the rocky incline, her body too weak to break her fall properly. When she opened her eyes, the sun had moved across the sky. Strong hands were lifting her, and she found herself looking into the darkest eyes she had ever seen. The man holding her had long black hair adorned with eagle feathers, and his bronze skin was marked with scars that spoke of countless battles. He was Apache, she realized, with a mixture of fear and resignation. She had heard the stories, the warnings about the savage warriors who showed no mercy to white settlers. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "I have nothing left to take. If you're going to kill me, just make it quick." The warrior studied her face for a long moment, then spoke in accented English. "I am Nal Nish. You are dying." She nodded weakly. "I know." Instead of reaching for the knife at his belt, Nal Nish lifted her more securely in his arms and carried her toward the Apache camp. Sarah's vision blurred as they moved, but she could see other warriors watching with curiosity and suspicion. Women emerged from hide shelters, their faces painted with intricate designs, their eyes following this strange procession. Nalnish brought her to a shelter at the edge of the camp and laid her gently on a bed of soft animal skins. An elderly Apache woman appeared, her weathered hands immediately beginning to examine Sarah's condition. She spoke rapidly in Apache to Nalnish, who nodded grimly and disappeared. Over the next several days, Sarah drifted in and out of consciousness. The old woman, whom she learned was called Grandmother Ayana, fed her small portions of broth made from rabbit and wild herbs. Slowly, Sarah's strength began to return, though she remained painfully thin. During her lucid moments, she watched the life of the Apache camp unfold around her. She saw children playing with toys made from sticks and stones, their laughter echoing through the desert air. Women worked together preparing hides, weaving baskets and tending fires, their conversations flowing in the musical Apache language. The men returned from hunts with deer and elk, their faces painted for war or ceremony. It was nothing like the savage picture she'd been taught to imagine. Nalnish visited her shelter each evening, bringing fresh water and checking on her progress. He spoke little, but his presence was oddly comforting. Sarah began to notice things about him that contradicted everything she thought she knew about Apache warriors. His hands were gentle when he helped her sit up to drink. His eyes held intelligence and kindness, not the cruel savagery she had expected. One evening, as the desert air grew cool and the campfires cast dancing shadows, Sarah finally felt strong enough to sit up on her own. Nalnish arrived with his usual offering of water and wild berries, but this time he settled beside her shelter instead of leaving immediately. "Why did you save me?" she asked quietly. Nalnish was silent for so long that she thought he wouldn't answer. Finally he spoke, his voice deep and measured. "I have seen much death, war, disease, hunger. When I found you, I saw something different." "What did you see?" "Courage. You could have begged for money in your town, sold yourself for food. Instead, you chose to die with honor in the desert. That is the way of a warrior." Sarah felt tears welling in her eyes. No one had ever called her courageous before. In Tombstone, she had been pitied at best, reviled at worst. "Your people must think you're crazy for bringing a white woman into your camp." Nalnish smiled slightly, the first time she had seen any humor in his stern features. "Some do. Others say the spirit sent you for a reason." What reason could that be? Perhaps to teach us, perhaps to learn. The Apache way is to find strength in all things, even in what others see as weakness. As the days passed, Sarah's health continued to improve under Grandmother Ayana's care. The old woman had taken a particular interest in her, teaching her words in Apache and showing her how to prepare traditional foods. Sarah learned that Ayana had lost her own daughter to a cavalry raid years before, and perhaps saw in Sarah a chance to fill that emptiness. The other women of the tribe were slower to accept her, watching her with curious but guarded eyes. Sarah understood their caution. She was, after all, one of the people who had driven them from their ancestral lands, who hunted them like animals. But gradually, through small gestures and attempts to help with daily tasks, she began to earn their tentative respect. Sarah discovered that Nalnish held a position of great honor among his people. He was not just a warrior, but a war chief, one of the men who made decisions for the entire band. His father had been a legendary leader, and Nalnish had proven himself in countless battles against both Mexican and American forces. Yet despite his fearsome reputation among his enemies, within the camp, he was known for his wisdom and fairness. One morning, Sarah woke to find the camp in a state of excited preparation. Warriors were painting their faces and checking their weapons, while the women packed supplies and secured the shelters. Grandmother Ayana explained in broken English that scouts had reported a cavalry patrol approaching from the east. "We must move quickly," Nalnish told Sarah as he prepared his horse. "The soldiers will not distinguish between warrior and woman, Apache or white. If they find you here, they will assume you are captive and attack." Sarah felt a stab of fear, not for herself, but for these people who had shown her such unexpected kindness. "What can I do to help?" Nalnish paused in tightening his saddle. "You can stay alive. That is enough." The band moved with practiced efficiency, breaking camp and disappearing into the rocky hills within hours. Sarah rode behind Grandmother Ayana, clinging to the old woman as their horse navigated treacherous mountain paths. By evening, they had reached a hidden canyon where water flowed from natural springs and caves, provided shelter from both weather and enemies. That night, as the Apache settled into their temporary camp, Sarah found herself thinking about her old life in Tombstone. The comfortable house with its wooden floors and glass windows seemed like something from another world. Here, sleeping on animal skins under the stars, she felt more alive than she had in years. Nalnish found her sitting by one of the small fires, staring up at the brilliant display of stars unmarred by town lights. "You are quiet tonight," he observed, settling beside her. "I was thinking about how much my life has changed. A month ago, I thought I knew what the world was like. I thought I knew who I was. And now? Now I'm not sure of anything." All day, she turned to look at him, this man who had become such an unexpected presence in her life. "In Tombstone, I was nobody special, just another widow struggling to survive. Here, I feel like I might be something more." Nalnish reached out and gently touched her hand, his calloused fingers warm against her skin. "The Apache believe that each person has a spirit animal that guides their path. When I first saw you in the desert, dying but not defeated, I knew your spirit was strong, like the eagle. Eagles do not beg for food or shelter. They soar above the storms." Sarah felt her heart racing at his touch, at the intensity in his dark eyes. "What is your spirit animal?" "The wolf. Wolves are loyal, fierce in protecting their pack. They choose one mate for life and guard them above all else." The implications of his words hung in the air between them, like smoke from the campfire. Sarah had felt the growing attraction between them, the way his presence made her feel safe and valued in a way she had never experienced before. But the gulf between their worlds seemed impossible to bridge. "Nalnish," she said softly, "what future could we possibly have? I'm a white woman, And you're an Apache war chief. Both our peoples would see it as betrayal. He was quiet for a long moment, then reached up to touch her face with infinite gentleness. The Apache way is not the white way. We do not choose our mates for politics or property. We choose them for the strength they bring to our spirit. You have brought light to my darkness, healing to wounds I thought would never close. Before she could respond, he leaned forward and kissed her, a soft press of lips that sent warmth flooding through her entire body. When they parted, Sarah felt as though the world had shifted beneath her feet. Over the following weeks, as the band moved through the desert and mountains to stay ahead of pursuing cavalry, Sarah and Nalnish grew closer. He taught her to ride Apache style, to read the signs of weather and wildlife, to find water in the most unlikely places. She shared stories of her childhood on a farm in Kansas, her dreams of the life she had once imagined for herself. The other members of the band began to accept her presence more readily as they saw how she adapted to their ways. She learned to tan hides, to weave baskets from desert grass, to prepare pemmican for the long journeys. Her hands, once soft from a life of relative ease, grew strong and calloused from honest work. Grandmother Ayana became her closest friend and teacher, sharing not just practical skills, but the spiritual beliefs that guided Apache life. Sarah learned about the mountain spirits, the sacred places where the people went to pray, the ceremonies that marked the changing seasons, and the passages of life. One evening, as they camped in a hidden valley where ancient pictographs covered the rock walls, Ayana pulled Sarah aside for a serious conversation. "You love him," the old woman stated matter-of-factly. Sarah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment, but she nodded. "Yes, and he loves you. This old woman can see it in the way he looks at you, like you are the sunrise after a long night. But I don't know if love is enough. Our peoples have been at war for so long. How can we bridge that gap?" Ayana smiled, her weathered face creasing with wisdom. "Child, the spirits do not see color of skin or language of tongue. They see only the truth of the heart. Nalnish needs a strong woman to stand beside him, to help him lead our people through the dark times ahead. You have proven your strength. I'm not Apache. I don't know your customs, your ceremonies. These things can be learned. But courage, loyalty, the will to sacrifice for others, these cannot be taught. You have them already." That night, Nalnish asked Sarah to walk with him away from the campfires, up to a ledge that overlooked the vast desert. The moon was full, casting silver light across the endless landscape. "Sarah," he began, then paused as if searching for the right words. "Among my people, when a man wishes to take a wife, he must prove himself worthy. He must show that he can provide for her, protect her, honor her as she deserves." Sarah's heart began to pound. "Nalnish, what are you saying?" He turned to face her fully, his dark eyes reflecting the moonlight. "I'm saying that I want you to be my wife, if you will have me. Not because you have nowhere else to go, but because you have become the other half of my soul." Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks as she looked at this man who had saved her life in more ways than one. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." The wedding ceremony took place 3 days later, conducted according to Apache tradition under the desert stars. Sarah wore a dress of soft deerskin, decorated with turquoise beads, made for her by the women of the tribe as a wedding gift. Naalnish stood proud in his finest clothing, his war paint replaced with ceremonial designs that spoke of new beginnings. Grandmother Ayana conducted the ritual, binding their hands together with a cord made from eagle feathers while speaking prayers in Apache. The entire band gathered around them, their faces painted for celebration, their voices raised in traditional songs. "You are no longer two people walking separate paths," Ayana declared. "You are one spirit, one heart, one purpose. May the mountain spirits bless your union and make it strong against all storms." As husband and wife, Sarah and Nalnish settled into the rhythm of Apache life. She learned to be a war chief's woman, advising him on matters both great and small, standing beside him as he made decisions that affected the entire band. Her outsider's perspective often provided valuable insights, helping Nalnish see situations from new angles. The challenges were real and constant. Cavalry patrols continued to hunt them, forcing the band to stay constantly on the move. Resources were scarce, and the traditional hunting grounds grew smaller each year as more white settlers claimed the land. Disease brought by contact with white settlements took its toll, and Sarah's knowledge of white medicine proved invaluable in treating some illnesses. Through it all, Sarah and Nalnish's love deepened and strengthened. She had found in him not just a husband, but a true partner who valued her thoughts and treated her as an equal. He had found in her not just a wife, but a counselor and friend who brought new wisdom to their ancient ways. 1 year after their wedding, Sarah discovered she was with child. The news brought great joy to the camp, as children were always seen as gifts from the spirits. Grandmother Ayana fussed over her constantly, making sure she ate properly and rested enough. "This child will be special," the old woman declared. "Born of 2 worlds, raised in the Apache way, but carrying the blood of both peoples. Perhaps this is the bridge we need." As Sarah's pregnancy progressed, she thought often about the child growing within her. Would their son or daughter face the same prejudices that she had encountered? Or would this new generation find ways to heal the wounds between their peoples? The child was born on a crisp autumn morning, as the desert air carried the scent of sage and pine from the mountains. It was a daughter, strong and healthy, with her father's dark hair and her mother's green eyes. They named her Ayana, after the grandmother who had helped bring her into the world. As Sarah held her newborn daughter, looking into those bright eyes that seemed to hold infinite possibilities, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. She had entered the desert as a broken woman with nothing left to lose, and emerged as a wife, mother, and respected member of a community that had once been her enemy. The transformation had not been easy. There had been nights when she cried herself to sleep, missing the familiar comforts of her old life. There had been moments of doubt when she wondered if she truly belonged in this world of ancient traditions and constant danger. But through it all, Nalnish had stood beside her, patient and understanding, helping her find her place among his people. Now, as she watched her husband hold their daughter with such tender reverence, Sarah knew that she had found something more valuable than the security she had once sought. She had found a love that transcended the boundaries of race and culture, a partnership built on mutual respect and shared dreams for the future. The Apache way was not an easy path, but it was one that honored strength, courage, and the bonds of family above all else. Sarah had learned to find beauty in the harsh desert landscape, wisdom in the old stories, and purpose in the daily struggle for survival. As the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of red and gold, Sarah reflected on how much her life had changed since that day when she stumbled, half dead, into Nalnish's arms. She had asked for refuge and found instead a new identity, a new purpose, and a love that would sustain her through whatever challenges lay ahead. The future remained uncertain. The pressures on the Apache people would only increase as more settlers claimed their lands. There would be more battles, more losses, more difficult decisions to make. But Sarah no longer faced that future alone. She had found her place among a people who valued honor over comfort, courage over safety, and love over convention. In the growing darkness, Nalnish came to sit beside her, their daughter sleeping peacefully in Sarah's arms. "Are you happy?" he asked quietly, the question carrying the weight of all their hopes and fears. Sarah looked at him, this warrior who had seen past her broken exterior to the strength within, who had loved her when she couldn't love herself. "I am home," she said simply. And in that moment, under the vast canopy of desert stars, Sarah Matthews, now Sarah Nalnish, knew that she had found something infinitely more precious than the life she had lost. She had found herself, and in doing so, had discovered that love truly could conquer the deepest divisions and heal the most painful wounds. The skeletal, rejected woman who had stumbled into the desert to die had indeed become a queen, not through wealth or birthright, but through the strength of her spirit and the depth of her love. And as she sat there with her family, surrounded by the people who had become her own, Sarah knew that her greatest adventures were still to come. The years that followed baby Ayana's birth tested Sarah's resolve in ways she had never imagined. The Apache people faced increasing pressure from the expanding railroad lines and growing settlements. Traditional hunting grounds disappeared beneath barbed wire fences, and the sacred mountains where their ancestors were buried became mining claims owned by distant corporations. Sarah found herself in the unique position of serving as a bridge between two worlds that seemed determined to destroy each other. Her knowledge of English and understanding of white customs made her invaluable in negotiations, but it also placed her under constant scrutiny from both sides. Some Apache elders still questioned her loyalty during council meetings, while any white soldiers or officials who discovered her existence viewed her as a traitor to her own race. During one particularly harsh winter, when game was scarce and the band was forced to remain hidden in a series of caves high in the Chiricahua Mountains, Sarah witnessed the depths of Apache resilience. The people shared their meager rations without complaint, the elders telling stories through the long, cold nights to keep spirits alive while bodies grew thin. She watched Nalnish make impossible decisions, choosing which families would receive the last of their supplies, knowing that others would go without. "This is what leadership truly means," he told her one night, as they lay huddled together for warmth, their daughter sleeping between them. "Not the glory of battle or the respect of warriors, but carrying the weight of every empty belly, every child's cry in the darkness." Sarah had grown strong during her time with the Apache, but she had never fully understood the constant burden her husband carried until that winter. She began to take on more responsibilities, helping to organize the women's work, mediating disputes, and using her unique perspective to find solutions that honored Apache traditions while adapting to changing circumstances. Spring brought both relief and new challenges. A young cavalry lieutenant named William Henderson arrived at Fort Bowie with orders to negotiate the surrender of Nalnish's band. Unlike the brutal officers who had preceded him, Henderson seemed genuinely interested in finding a peaceful solution. When he requested a meeting under a white flag, Nalnish agreed, but insisted that Sarah accompany him as translator. The meeting took place in a neutral canyon, with warriors positioned on the surrounding ridges and cavalry troops waiting at a respectful distance. Henderson was younger than Sarah had expected, perhaps 25, with honest blue eyes and a nervous habit of adjusting his uniform jacket. "Chief Nalnish," Henderson began formally, "I come with an offer from the territorial government. Safe passage to the San Carlos Reservation, with guarantees of food, shelter, and protection for your people." Sarah translated the offer, watching her husband's face remain impassive. She knew what he was thinking without words passing between them. San Carlos was known among the Apache as a place of slow death, where proud warriors withered away under the desert sun, dependent on government rations and forbidden from practicing their traditional ways. "Tell the young soldier," Nalnish said quietly, "that the Apache have lived free in these mountains for 1,000 generations. We do not know how to live in cages, even comfortable ones." As Sarah translated, she saw understanding dawn in Henderson's eyes. He was an idealistic young man who believed he was offering salvation, but he was beginning to grasp the magnitude of what he was really asking. "Chief," Henderson said, his voice losing some of its official tone, "I understand your position, but you must see the reality. More troops arrive every month. The territory is offering terms now, but that may not always be the case." The negotiations continued for 3 days, with both men showing remarkable patience and respect for each other's positions. Sarah found herself not merely translating words, but helping each man understand the deeper meanings and motivations behind them. Henderson began to see the Apache not as savages to be subdued, but as a people fighting to preserve their way of life. Nalnish, in turn, recognized that the young lieutenant was genuinely trying to find a solution that might allow his people to survive. On the final day, as it became clear that no agreement could be reached, Henderson made an unexpected personal appeal. I'm sorry, I don't know how to address you properly." "Sarah Nalnish," she replied simply. "Mrs. Nish, you understand both worlds better than anyone here. Surely you can see that this path leads only to more bloodshed. Your people, your daughter, don't they deserve a chance at peace? Sarah felt the weight of both men's eyes upon her. She thought of little Ayana, now taking her first steps and beginning to speak in both Apache and English. What kind of world would her daughter inherit? Lieutenant Henderson, she said slowly, you speak of peace as if it were something your government could grant us like a gift. But peace is not the absence of war. Peace is the ability to live according to your beliefs, to raise your children in the ways of your ancestors, to honor your dead and pray to your gods without fear. She paused, seeing both men hanging on her words. The reservation may offer safety for our bodies, but it would mean death for our souls. That is not peace. That is simply another kind of war. Henderson left that day with his mission unfulfilled, but Sarah sensed that their words had affected him deeply. Months later, she would learn that he had written lengthy reports to his superiors, recommending a completely different approach to Apache relations. Those reports would be filed away and forgotten, but Sarah's respect for the young officer remained. As Ayana grew from a toddler into a bright, curious child, Sarah faced new challenges in raising a daughter who belonged to both worlds, but might be fully accepted by neither. The little girl spoke Apache as her first language, but learned English songs from her mother. She could track a deer through the desert and weave grass into intricate patterns, but she also knew stories of faraway places called cities where buildings reached toward the sky. "What am I, Mama?" Ayana asked one day as they sat by a stream, watching tadpoles dart through the clear water. She was 6 years old, with her father's thoughtful nature and her mother's quick intelligence. Sarah considered the question carefully. It was one she had been dreading and expecting in equal measure. "You are Apache," she said finally, "but you are also something new, something the world has never seen before. You carry the strength of two peoples, the wisdom of two ways of seeing. The other children sometimes say I'm not really Apache because my eyes are green like yours." Sarah's heart ached at the casual cruelty that children could inflict without understanding. "Come here, little one." She pulled Ayana close, stroking her long dark hair. "Your father is the bravest warrior in all the Apache bands. Your grandmother Ayana was famous for her healing skills. Your great-grandfather led his people through the time of the Great Drought. That Apache blood flows in your veins just as surely as mine does. But what about your blood, Mama? What am I from that? You are the dreams your grandmother had of a better world. You are the hope that someday people won't have to choose between loving their family and honoring their heritage. You are proof that love is stronger than fear." That evening, Sarah shared her concerns with Nish as they watched their daughter play with the other children around the campfire. Despite her reassuring words to Ayana, Sarah worried about what the future held for a child caught between two worlds at war with each other. "She will find her path," Nish said with quiet confidence. "The spirits do not make mistakes. Ayana was born for a purpose we may not understand yet, but her mixed heritage is a gift, not a burden." As if summoned by their conversation, Ayana came running over, her face bright with excitement. "Papa, look what grandmother taught me." She held up a small pouch, decorated with intricate beadwork, the pattern incorporating both traditional Apache designs and a few elements that were uniquely her own creation. Nish examined the pouch carefully, his expression serious. "This is beautiful work, daughter. You have honored the old ways while adding something new. This is what it means to build bridges." The years brought both triumphs and tragedies. Sarah gave birth to a son they named Joaquin, a sturdy boy with his father's fierce spirit and his mother's stubborn determination. The band weathered harsh winters and dry summers, always moving, always adapting, always maintaining their freedom despite the shrinking territory available to them. Sarah's role within the tribe continued to evolve. She became known not just as the war chief's white wife, but as a respected counselor in her own right. Women brought their problems to her, knowing she would listen without judgment and offer practical advice. Men sought her opinion on matters of strategy, valuing her unique perspective on the changing world around them. One autumn evening, as the band prepared to move to winter camp, riders approached, carrying news that would change everything. Geronimo, the most famous of all Apache leaders, had finally surrendered. The long wars were ending, and the remaining free bands were being systematically hunted down or convinced to give up their resistance. The council meeting that night was unlike any Sarah had ever witnessed. Voices were raised in passionate argument as the people debated their options. Some warriors advocated fighting to the death rather than accepting reservation life. Others pointed out that their ammunition was running low, their numbers had been steadily diminishing, and their children deserved a chance to grow up without the constant threat of cavalry attacks. Nalnish listened to all perspectives before speaking, his voice carrying the authority earned through years of wise leadership. My brothers, my sisters, we have fought the good fight. We have honored our ancestors and kept our traditions alive when many said we would not survive another season. But now we must think not just of our own pride, but of the children who will carry our blood and our stories into the future. He paused, his gaze finding Sarah's across the circle. Sometimes the greatest courage is not in fighting, but in finding new ways to preserve what matters most. Our ceremonies, our language, our connection to the land, these things can survive even if we must adapt how we practice them. The debate continued through the night, but gradually a consensus emerged. They would seek terms for surrender, but only with guarantees that families would not be separated and that they would be allowed to maintain their cultural practices within reasonable limits. Sarah played a crucial role in the subsequent negotiations, serving as both translator and cultural interpreter. Her presence helped convince the military officials that the Apache were serious about finding a peaceful resolution, while her understanding of Apache values ensured that the terms would be acceptable to her adoptive people. The day of surrender was heartbreaking and hopeful in equal measure. Warriors who had never bowed to any authority laid down their weapons with dignity intact. Families gathered their few possessions, preparing for a journey to an uncertain future. Children who had known only the freedom of the mountains faced the prospect of walls and boundaries for the first time. As Sarah helped pack their belongings, she found herself touching each item with special reverence. The hide dress she had worn for her wedding, now carefully wrapped in soft cloth. The cradleboard that had carried both her children, decorated with protective symbols. The medicine pouch grandmother Ayana had given her before the old woman's death 2 winters before. "Are you afraid?" Nalnish asked as they prepared to mount their horses for the final journey. Sarah considered the question honestly. "Yes, but not of what you might think. I'm not afraid of reservation life or government officials or starting over again. I'm afraid that our children will grow up thinking this is defeat instead of transformation. Then we must teach them otherwise," he replied, lifting 9-year-old Ayana onto her horse while 6-year-old Joaquin scrambled up behind his father. "We must show them that adapting is not the same as surrendering, that keeping our hearts free is more important than keeping our bodies free." The journey to the reservation took 5 days, with military escort and supply wagons raising dust clouds that could be seen for miles. At night, as the Apache families gathered around carefully rationed campfires, Sarah listened to the elders telling the old stories to the children, ensuring that the next generation would remember where they came from. On the 3rd night, Ayana approached her mother with questions that revealed how deeply she was thinking about their situation. "Mama, will I still be able to learn the mountain songs? Will the spirits be able to find us in this new place?" "The spirits are not bound by fences or reservations, little daughter. They live in our hearts, in our memories, in the stories we tell and the traditions we keep alive. As long as we remember who we are, we will never truly be lost." The reservation proved to be both better and worse than Sarah had expected. The government had kept its promises about keeping families together and allowing cultural practices, But the daily reality of confinement was harder on the people than she had anticipated. Warriors who had ranged freely across hundreds of miles now found themselves restricted to a few square miles of designated territory. Sarah's unique position became even more valuable in this new environment. She served as liaison between the Apache families and the reservation administrators, helping to resolve conflicts and misunderstandings before they could escalate. Her children, with their natural bilingual abilities and cultural fluency, became invaluable as well, helping other families navigate the complex requirements of reservation life. Years passed, and Sarah watched her children grow into remarkable young adults. Ayana became a teacher, working to preserve Apache language and traditions while also helping children learn the skills they would need to succeed in the changing world. Joaquin became a skilled negotiator, using his heritage from both sides to advocate for Apache rights within the legal system. As Sarah entered her 5th decade of life, she often reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her from the dusty streets of Tombstone to this position of respect and influence among the Apache people. The skeletal, rejected woman who had stumbled into the desert seeking only death had indeed become a queen, not through conquest or birthright, but through love, courage, and an unwavering commitment to building bridges between worlds. Standing on the porch of their modest reservation house one evening, watching the sunset paint the familiar mountains in shades of gold and crimson, Sarah felt Nalnish's hand slip into hers. After more than 20 years of marriage, his touch still sent warmth through her entire being. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly, the question carrying the weight of all their shared experiences. Sarah squeezed his hand tighter, thinking of everything they had gained and lost, everything they had built together. "Never," she said simply. "Every choice led me to you, to our children, to this life that I wouldn't trade for any other." As night fell over the reservation, Sarah knew that their story was far from over. There would be new challenges, new opportunities to serve their people, new chances to prove that love could indeed conquer the deepest divisions. The woman who had once been rejected by one world and saved by another had found her true home in the space between them, building bridges that would last for generations to come.